think the first thing to say about radio is that, along with film, it's probably the most imaginative medium there is. I mean, you can be literally anywhere on a radio. You can be inside the mind of an 8-year-old girl, or at the bottom of a mine after an accident in Elizabethan England, or Roman Britain, wherever you want to be, really. The potential is extraordinary, and obviously not limited by the cost of set design as you are in other media. So obviously simplicity is best. It's also the most intimate of mediums. I can't think of any other medium which takes you so close to the thoughts and feelings and worldview of individual characters. And obviously that gets closer the closer the actors get to the microphone. But you can do anything on radio. I mean, a radio producer that I worked with several times in Scotland got the rights to do The Exorcist for the first time on radio. Very scary. You can do horror on radio if you want to. It was so scary that it had to be scheduled after midnight. The world is your oyster in terms of radio. Worth remembering, of course, that the BBC is still the biggest commissioner of drama anywhere in the world. It commissions thousands of hours of radio drama and readings every year. So, and some very famous plays were first on radio. A Man for All Seasons was first on radio. Of course, the one everyone remembers is Under Milk Wood. Incredibly atmospheric, poetic, and much loved play by Dylan Thomas. Well, the thing to sort of note right from the start, and it's so obvious, but you may think it hardly needs saying, but your palette as a radio writer is incredibly limited. But that very limitation, I think, is a liberation, kind of feeding into what we were just saying. So you have on your palette the human voice, music, sound effects, and silence. And that's all you have. And out of that, you are free to construct narrative, worlds, stories, characters, necessarily, I think, in a slightly different way to the way you do it on television or on a stage or in movies, where obviously you have the benefit of a director of photography and a set and so on. But the thing to think about is see this not as a limitation, but as a kind of a challenge and an inspiration to take us to the world of Elizabethan England, or to take us to the bottom of that mine, or to take us to a submarine trapped on the bottom of the ocean, or, as I say, simply inside the head of, for example, everybody will remember the Alan Bennett monologue, A Chip in the Sugar, the mind of a middle-aged man who's terrified he's going to lose his mother to his mother's new lover. So you can do all those things. You can be in outer space or inside your head, using those four resources sparingly. I wouldn't advise using silence too often, because, as we'll come on to in a moment, radio is very easy to turn off. So the human voice, a judicious use of music, and a well-placed sound effect are the kind of tools in your toolbox. And if you've got time to listen to sort of only one piece of work, and just to say here that if you go on the BBC Sounds app online, they have an archive of lots of current plays and also selected plays over the course of many years. Then I beg you, and you probably find this on YouTube, to check out a play called Spoonface Steinberg by Lee Hall. Many of you will know it already. It's probably everybody's favorite radio play, an extraordinary monologue, and that's useful for our current purpose, which takes us inside the mind of an 8-year-old girl, an autistic girl who's dying of cancer. And if that sounds incredibly gloomy, it isn't. It's the most joyous, wonderful, transformative piece of work, a meditation on illness, opera, the the Nazi regime in Germany, and obliquely, it's an account of her parents' marriage viewed kind of, which is glimpsed through her words. And anecdotally, this was so powerful and so moving that people were sort of in tears as they were driving along the motorway listening to it. And just a sort of little personal note here. This is the only time my late father-in-law, not a great lover of the theatre, ever initiated a conversation about a radio play. He used to work a lot outside at his office in the garden, and he heard this play one day, and it's the only time he's ever phoned up to say, "I've just heard this play. You really have got to listen to it. It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard." So if you listen to one play, listen to that one. Probably find it on YouTube. Yes, I'd just urge people to be ambitious. It's so easy these days. You might just want to record your piece into your smartphone. The recording quality of that can be very, very good. If you want to play around a little more, there's an extraordinary free open access app called Audacity, which many of you will know about already. It's useful for lots and lots of things, but it's a way for you, and as I say, it's free to edit your voice or the voice of a friend who might be reading your lines, and use music and sound effects. And again, a simple search on Google will reveal an enormous number of sources of free and rights cleared library sounds and library music. And I think you can probably see on a sidebar here the names of some of those sites. And I'd urge you once again to check out BBC Sounds for that archive of old plays. They keep recent plays online for 30 days or so, and selected other things, just to get a sense of how people are using that palette that we've talked about, sound, voice, music, to place the listener firmly in the world that the writer wants to create. What we need to know as an audience, we'll come on to this in a minute, as soon as possible, is, who is this? Who are we dealing with? Where are we? What point in time is this? And you will be astonished if you've never looked into this, what's out there for free, and what you can use to make your script really lift off the page and into the ears of the audience. So a lot of you will be wondering what a radio script or a script for voice should look like, and I'll refer you here to a script of one of my own radio plays, Philip in Sydney, which was first broadcast 10 years ago and has been repeated several times. You can listen to it, follow the link at the side of the screen, but really this is just for you to sort of see what it should look like, how you set it out, how you indent the dialogue, how you mark what is effects, what's music, and how you write stage directions. It's not essential that you do it like that, but it's the BBC kind of standard format, and also because of the wide spacing, it's particularly easy to read for actors. So yeah, have a look at that. Read the whole script if you want to. Listen to the script. Wonderful performance by Tim McInerney, who a lot of you will remember from Blackadder, playing the extraordinary mad father of the poet Philip Larkin, who took the young Philip on 2 visits to Germany in the mid-1930s. So this is a play about the ultimate appalling holiday with your mad father. And it may lead you to think again about some of those very famous lines of Philip Larkin about parents and what they do to you. Very, very simple, really. Radio is absolutely the easiest thing in the world to switch off. Who's the audience for radio plays? Well, traditionally, of course, I mean, we're moving into the podcast era now, but traditionally, this was people at home for whatever reason, and people driving. So the podcast, we're in the podcast era now, and a lot of people are listening to podcasts as they drive, but they still have it's still incredibly easy to change channels or switch off. So the thing you need to do, you have about 15, 20 seconds at the beginning to grab people's attention. Otherwise, they will do something else. So I'm not saying that your first line has to be totally show-offy, but one thinks of the famous opening of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Martha comes into the room and goes, "What a dump." Something like that. Just shake people up a bit. Don't start with kind of waves lapping on a shingle shore. It's just going to send people off to sleep. So let's grab people's attention right at the start. The other thing, we can't see the actors, can we? When we listen to radio plays or the Archers, if we like the Archers, you've all got a kind of sense of what the people look like. But it can be incredibly confusing if, say, you've got kind of 3 male or female voices, all roughly the same age. So I know we're only dealing with monologues and duologues here, but even with the duologue, I think try and choose contrasting voices so that we always know who's speaking at any given moment. I'm a great fan. I've got this phrase, and this applies to sort of all plays. I think I'm a great fan of hitting the ground running. The sense of sort of starting a play should be like boarding a moving bus, I always think. And this is a stage play, not a radio play, but an opening that sticks in my mind from recent years. Some of you may have seen this play. Martin McDonagh's play Hangmen, which had a long run in London, which famously opens the opening scene is of a man being hanged, and anybody who's still kind of finishing off their meal or crunching their sweets pretty soon starts to pay attention when something like that's going on. Now, a little bit harder on radio, but you get the general point. Let's get things moving. Let's start in motion. So I think we'll probably all agree that smell and sound are the 2 most instantly evocative senses, the senses that have the ability to transport us back in time to particular moments in our past. So I've got a couple of exercises. They're really the same exercise, just carried out for sound, one for sound and one for music. But I've often found this kind of quite helpful with students or writers generally, just a way of kind of limbering up and getting your head in the right space to write for the palette of radio. I'd like you to choose a sound that reminds you either of childhood, a love affair, or a place of work. 3 very evocative places or times. So an example of this might be the particular sound made by your sister coming down the stairs, the sound made by your father's car pulling into the driveway, a lover's voice, a voice in a football crowd, or the sound of a squeaky door in the works canteen. So think about it, let it fill your mind, and block out everything else. Go back to a moment that you remember hearing it. Who's there? What are they thinking, hoping, fearing? What does the sound mean in the moment? Could it be fear of Dad's return, irritation at your sister, your pulse quickening at the sound of a lover's voice? Or is it just time to go back to work? Let the scene fill out and populate itself. What does the room look like? If not a room, what's the location? What colours are there? What smells? Does anyone else arrive? What thoughts and feelings does it conjure up? So jot down as much of this as you can. Without thinking about it too carefully, write a short scene inspired by the noise. And just as a tip, the scene doesn't necessarily have to include the noise. I'm just asking you to sort of go through this kind of mental process just to sort of put yourself in a place to write something. And I did this exercise recently. Someone used the example of a particular ringtone that she'd set on her phone, which was only for her hated boss. The noise was sort of therefore an instrument of torture, something to be absolutely dreaded, shouted at or turned off. But it also gave her a brilliant structure for a short 10-minute play. So I'd like you just to do that for me and see how you get on. And then when you've done that, I'd like you to do exactly the same, but this time choose a piece of music. Easiest thing in the world. Choose something, don't think about it too much. Choose something that has meant something to you, or perhaps it's an earworm that you currently can't get rid of. I'd like you to do exactly the same exercise this time for that piece of music. If you go the monologue route, just one or two kind of quick thoughts about that. What you need to think about is who you're addressing. You know, you need to fix an idea of who you're addressing in your mind. It could be a friend, a lover, the audience who just happen to be listening. But bear in mind, who are you speaking to? The other thing about a monologue is, just like any other play, it does need a beginning, a middle, and an end. So be very careful to shape it in terms of the outcome that you want to arrive at it. And we mentioned this before, but again, I'm not saying it's everybody's idea of their favorite work, but famous monologue, Chipping the Sugar by Alan Bennett. Give it a listen. It's been done on TV and on radio. And just see how the narrator there manages to conjure up an entire world, the entire world of this rather sad and lonely middle-aged man who's terrified that he's going to lose his closest friend, who happens to be his mother, to the mother's new lover. And just think about it. Again, it's sort of, it might be a style, it might be a type of storytelling that you personally don't like, but just listen to it and think about the craft, how Alan Bennett in that monologue conjures up a whole world, what it looks like, what it smells like, what its prejudices are, how it sketches in the characters, how you see the characters perfectly in your mind's eye as you do the ironing or drive or whatever it happens to be, and use that as a kind of starting point for your own endeavors.